Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. Pompeii was shining as the brightest jewel of the Golden Age of the Roman Empire. The city was one of the wealthiest, most dazzling, and most vibrant places in the world at that time. Located at the foot of Mount Vesuvius in a valley where the blue waters of the sea sparkled with light, Pompeii stood at the crossroads of the Roman Empire's trade routes. Every corner of the city gleamed like a diamond, adorned with magnificent structures and its wealth. The facades of villas were covered in white marble, and the city was decorated with statues that made it look like a paradise garden. Pompeii was not just a city, but a center symbolizing the grandeur of the Roman Empire. The heart of trade, the home of wealthy merchants and aristocrats, and a hub of entertainment and luxury. Throughout the day, everything in the city was covered in gold, money, and elegance. Not only the wealthiest families, but also the traders and shopkeepers walking the streets carried valuable items, bottles of wine, exotic fruits, all while smiling and making transactions. The nightlife in the city was mesmerizing. When night fell, Pompeii's streets were illuminated by bright lamps, creating an intoxicating atmosphere. Every night, wine was poured in the courtyards of villas, slaves dressed in fine fabrics danced, and aristocrats, while enjoying their meals at lavish tables, set up new games to pass the time at gambling tables. The city was full of happy, peaceful, and prosperous lives. The people of Pompeii were lost in luxury, living the best moments of their lives. Pompeii's grandeur was felt in every corner of the city, from temples to squares. One of the most famous temples, the Temple of Jupiter, rose high on a peak, and from there the heart of Pompeii could be seen shining brightly. The influence of Roman culture was visible in every detail of the temples and artistic structures. Rich decorations and sculptures symbolized the power of the gods and the people's relationship with this power. It was believed that in the presence of the gods, the sins of the people would be forgiven, their troubles would be alleviated, and their lives would become even more luxurious. That morning, an ordinary day began in Pompeii. Early in the morning, merchants opened their shops. Wine merchants, olive oil, and apple sellers set up their stalls. Farmers carried fresh fruits and vegetables, and slaves served their masters for the morning tasks. Aristocrats, while enjoying their wine in the courtyards of their villas, chatted and sometimes played games. People generally spent their days preparing for the grand festivities that would take place in the evening. Everything seemed to be going smoothly in Pompeii. Life in the city continued like a ritual, peacefully. No one noticed the silent threats coming from the massive Mount Vesuvius in the west. While people may have heard rumors about the volcano, they believed the mountain was inactive. Many thought the silence from the mountain meant a safe distance from it, assuming it had never erupted in the past and would not erupt now. Therefore, no one worried, and they continued their luxurious lives. The salty scent of the sea mixed with the morning breeze, intoxicating the merchants walking through the streets, while the city was submerged in a peaceful intoxication. The sky that morning was clear, blue, and calm. The blue waters of the sea shimmered with golden light. As the sun rose on the horizon, soft light spread across the streets of the city. Everyone smiled, laughed, worked, and enjoyed themselves, as if living in a world independent of time. However, that morning no one could predict that things would not continue as usual. In the hours that followed, a cracking sound shook the entire city deeply. It wasn't just the subtle shifting of the earth beneath the city. It was the first sign of the catastrophe that would engulf the city. Most of the people walking the streets didn't understand these vibrations. For many, that morning felt no different than any other. The people of Pompeii, believing the eruption of Mount Vesuvius was a distant threat that could never pose danger, continued with their routines. However, that morning everything would change. This fairy tale world, gleaming under the sun, would turn into a disaster in a matter of hours. And the people could not sense it. They had no idea that Vesuvius could erupt at any moment, and everything would come to an end. Pompeii, while experiencing its golden age, was unaware that its end was near, lost in luxury. Pompeii, as it did every morning, was about to begin its day. But that morning, it was much more than the start of an ordinary day. In this city, where everything seemed perfect, at every street corner people went about their daily tasks, none of them consciously noticing the impending disaster. At the beginning of that morning, the first tremor from the slopes of Mount Vesuvius caused deep unease over the city. At first, this tremor was accepted as a natural movement of the earth beneath the surface. The city's residents used to such events paid little attention to it. As the hours passed, the subtle tremors that had begun in the coolness of the morning grew more pronounced. Many people, dismissing the first shake, continued their work with indifference. Merchants opened their shops, slaves headed to the fields, and aristocrats began a leisurely breakfast in their villas. The city continued its routine, believing nothing was different. However, the first signs that the city's fate would change that morning went unnoticed by everyone. Soon after, a sound followed the movements of the earth. A loud and deep cracking sound echoed through the streets of the city. This sound seemed like a cry coming from the deep cracks beneath the earth. But the people of Pompeii also regarded this as just another natural earth movement. Another tremor, they thought. It's just a natural feature of the place. But this was only the beginning. Later in the day, the sky suddenly began to darken. Everything seemed normal, yet something was different. At first, the blue sky quickly turned gray. The warm and clear morning sunlight that Pompeii was accustomed to was replaced by an eerie darkness. Many people thought this was just a sign of an incoming rainstorm and continued with their daily tasks. However, as the minutes passed, first traces of fear began to surface. The salty wind from the sea, now combined with the darkening sky, revealed a faint wisp of smoke rising. On the horizon, gray smoke began to rise from the peak of Vesuvius, initially thin and then increasingly dense. Many people dismissed this as a result of the hot weather. It appeared to be just the rising of ordinary smoke. A few commented that the weather was a bit warmer, but this was something they were used to due to their lifestyle. However, as time passed, the smoke thickened. The sky became completely gray and heavy. Warm winds carried the salty air from the sea, bringing it to the city. It became clear that something was wrong. The people of Pompeii slowly began to sense a threat, but they couldn't fully understand what it was. In those moments, the temples of Pompeii began to fill with priests, gathered according to the city's traditional beliefs. The doors of the temples were quickly opened, and the priests began to pray to escape the wrath of the gods. They raised their hands in supplication to the Scandinavian gods, to Rome's mighty Jupiter, and to Pluto, the ruler of the underworld. Please, gods, have mercy on us, they prayed. Everyone was scrambling to prepare any offerings and prayers to escape the gods' anger. But these prayers had no power to prevent the destruction. The people of Pompeii, no matter how much they begged, the gods hadn't yet realized that their fate was already sealed. The people of the city began to feel a strange unease. Many noticed the change in temperature with the increasing smoke. As the winds quickly swept through the streets, the heat noticeably increased. Although no rain had fallen yet, the air felt tight, as though it were heralding a disaster. Gradually, the possibility of a massive eruption from the peak of Vesuvius began to instill fear. Yet the people of Pompeii still thought everything was normal. The thickening smoke deepened their fear, but they continued with their lives. Many merchants began to close their shops and return to their homes, but no one truly understood what was happening. Most people thought this was something temporary and dismissed it with thoughts of, the mountain is waking up again, but there's nothing to fear. Meanwhile, some people anxiously made their way to the temples. Many began to follow the priests' prayers, seeking forgiveness from the gods. But none of them knew that this was just the beginning. The power emanating from the depths of Vesuvius was growing stronger, and soon, the wild beast would awaken. While the streets of Pompeii were preoccupied with trying to ward off the gods' wrath, the city was on the brink of catastrophe. But no one was prepared. The fear in their eyes was like something out of a horror movie, yet it was real, and no one could feel how close the end of the world truly was. That morning, from the moment the sky over Pompeii began to darken, There was something strange in the city. The sky had turned deep gray, and the warmth of the winds had suddenly increased. Everyone in the city felt that something was wrong, but no one could have known how big the disaster would become. The heavy, gloomy atmosphere in the air was a sign of Vesuvius's awakening, yet no one was aware of it yet. It echoed with anger, a harbinger of catastrophe, and then everything happened all at once. Suddenly, Mount Vesuvius erupted with a terrifying explosion. A deep, shaking roar rocked the entire city. At first, this noise was accompanied by a great crackling sound like a scream rising from the depths of the earth. Eyes immediately turned upward. From the summit of Vesuvius, a giant fireball glowing with a terrifying light shot into the sky. Then, a curtain of smoke covered the city and eventually, the entire landscape. The sky turned reddish and orange, as if the world had been turned upside down. In that moment, the people of the city awoke to disaster, but it happened so suddenly that no one could fully grasp what was happening before events rapidly unfolded. The air that spread over the city carried a kind of angry poison. The temperature rose suddenly and it felt like being in an oven. As the lava began to rise, a wave of screams shook the city. The people of Pompeii, with their heartbeats racing, began running in panic. Those who ran toward the riverbank, trying to escape and survive, were desperate, their screams merging with each other. The lava spread rapidly, beginning to consume every corner of the city. This disaster marked the beginning of an end. The heat of the lava surrounded everything. Shops, villas, temples, everything started to disappear quickly. Many people still hadn't fully understood what was happening. Some merchants, slaves, and traders running along the river, driven mad by fear, were searching for an escape, but no place was safe. The city was transforming into a death camp. The people of Pompeii tried everything to escape. The streets had turned into a firestorm, everything covered in flames. As people tried to leave the city, some returned to their villas, trying to gather their most valuable possessions. On one side, the sick were abandoned in their beds, while on the other side, children ran in panic, clutching their mothers' hands, terrified of losing them. As the advancing lava picked up speed, people became more frantic, pushing and shoving each other in panic. Escape routes were rapidly closing, and the streets were narrowing. But no matter how hard they tried to escape, there was no way out. Falling stones and the slow-moving lava surrounded the city, blocking all paths. At that moment, the people of Pompeii began to lose not only their possessions, but also their lives. Many struggled to reach their loved ones, lost in the final moments, hearing their hearts beat as they fought for one last glance, one last touch. And then, the first petrified body in the city began to emerge. A woman, feeling the approach of the lava, took one last look into her husband's eyes. That step was her last. Her husband, similarly, took a step, but alas, he too would not escape the disaster. As the woman and man exchanged one final glance, the world seemed to stop. But their bodies, frozen like stone, turned that terrifying moment into stone, halting time. A father and son held each other tightly. They read the fear in each other's eyes one last time, their hands cold as ice as they grasped each other's. In that moment, death embraced them all, as they spent their last minutes together in fear. The streets were filled with bodies holding each other. Children, looking at their mothers and fathers one last time, left this world. Some shared their love with just a look, while others fell into an eternal sleep, gently caressing each other's backs in their final moments. In that moment, it seemed as if Pompeii's death had been delayed. In their final moments, the people did not resist death. Over time, they accepted this horrific end. The remaining survivors, in gloomy and silent resignation, turned to stone. A woman, leaning against a temple wall, left one final whisper on her lips. As the lava spread, the city's petrified inhabitants froze time, immortalizing a catastrophe. Pompeii had become a city of death, lost in the depths of history, frozen like a silent grave in time. The moment of the disaster, watching everything disappear, marked the end of a people and a civilization. But all that remained were these petrified remains. Each stone told the story of a person, the final moments of a relationship. And these petrified people were the lost lives in the dark pages of history. As the speed of the lava increased, the streets of Pompeii began to darken, and time seemed to freeze. This catastrophe, spreading like an autumn breeze throughout the city, deepened with each passing minute. Among the people who became immortalized, as statues, the cries of those seeking to chase one final spark could still be heard. In that terrifying moment when everything quickly vanished, the moments wedged between life and death were carved into the city as frozen versions of time. And all that remained were the petrified souls. Each petrified body was the last touch of another life. A glance, a touch, a kiss, a step, each one an imprint of a final moment. In the streets of Pompeii, a petrified moment was hidden at every corner, in every villa, in every temple. Here survival was impossible. Only the frozen forms of people living out their last moments remained. A slave had frozen while waiting for orders from his master. Fear still lingered in his eyes, but no word escaped his lips. Those attempting to escape the city were still trying to flee with hope, but no matter how far they ran, there was no way out. A merchant, his fingers frozen over the money, had a look of satisfaction in his eyes, but there was also anxiety. Everything turned to stone, just as it was the symbols of work, deals, gain, and loss, each one transformed into stone, winding up time itself. Every corner of the city was filled with silent statues. People trying to save their valuables began to turn to stone with the last trembling strength in their legs, leaving life behind. Everyone searched for one final hope, trying to come together. A man screamed for his lost wife, but no one heard him. A mother, holding her child, had a final whisper on her lips. Neither time nor place could be with them. At that moment, the lava slowly but surely intoxicated everything. The city was wedged between the narrow line of life and death. As the lava, like a river, swallowed the city, it left behind only a dark void. Pompeii, once a place where laughter, conversations, and screams were heard, had now turned those sounds into mere echoes and memories. Each lost moment of the people left its mark, a trace of time wedged between death and life. Those traces were memories crowned with both fear and love, loss and peace. A slave had stood to obey his master's orders, but the final command was never spoken before he turned to stone. A woman's gaze aimed at her lost husband sought one final hope, but nothing remained except the immortalization of that moment. As the lava took everything, it carried them with one final step. Only one scream was left behind, but nothing could be heard. The moment a child stopped, running helplessly around his mother, that child realized everything was over, but in that instant, he too became a statue. The heartbeats of the entire city froze, lost among these petrified people. In the petrified streets of Pompeii, terrifying statues stood, reminding of the fearful traces left by the people who once lived. A mother, holding her child, had one final whisper on her lips. At that moment, as the lava consumed everything, the moments wedged between life and death were immortalized. A step, a glance, an embrace, all became trapped in that moment and turned to stone. Life ended in a glance, and death became a statue within that moment. Pompeii became a tomb where time stood still. Each petrified body told a story, displaying the lost final moments of a people. That moment was the pinnacle of the catastrophe. The lava, like a shadow, silently devoured everything, consuming all dreams. Now the petrified people were merely memories, remnants of history, lost in the depths of the past. As Pompeii took its final breath, all that remained were those fears, those whispers, and those petrified emotions. Vesuvius had now turned into a monster, roaring from the depths of the earth as it continued to swallow the city. With every passing second, the dark shadows of fire, lava, and smoke collapsed over Pompeii. Slowly, the lava, which had transformed the city beyond recognition, covered each building, every stone wall, every statue, every object, one by one. The only sign of life in the city was the terrified, shared glance between people, clinging to each other in their final moments. Time slowed down, but that slowness felt like the end of a lost civilization. And as that end slowly approached, it dragged everyone into despair. The sky over Pompeii, covered in lava and smoke, had erased even the sun's light. Nothing remained. Only the moments frozen in time and the silhouettes of the petrified bodies were left behind. The city had become unrecognizable, its former wealth, light, and joy now gone. The streets filled with the lifeless bodies, eyes peering through shattered windows in terror. At every corner, there was an emptiness that reminded of that horrific moment when the people of Pompeii tried to survive with one last hope. Yet no hope, no escape, no prayer could save them. Everything was coming to an end. The people of Pompeii had fallen victim to the wrath of the gods. Despite seeing numerous signs meant to warn them, the people of Pompeii always took a step back, forgetting the value of life, lost in their sins. They were buried in pleasures, indulgence, gambling, alcohol, and corrupted lives. The city had become a place of egos and pleasures, but now, the price of this civilization had been etched in history as an immortal disaster. Slaves had thought of nothing but serving their masters. Merchants only focused on increasing their profits, and aristocrats thought only of their own luxury. Wealth had become an obsession for them all. Glory and ambition had intoxicated the city of Pompeii, but now those magnificent villas, grand squares, and shining gold, all of them were disappearing one by one. In the final moments of the merchants, only one thing filled their minds: the hope of saving their wealth and valuable possessions. But nothing escaped their hands. Just like everyone else, they too turned into piles of stone. As the people of Pompeii lived through this catastrophe, leaving nothing behind but memories, they looked at each other in their immortalized moments. A woman searching for her lost husband turned into a stone. A father trying to protect his child became petrified. A slave, frozen while waiting for his master's final command, became trapped in time. With the peak of fear, every one of them disappeared together. That fear and its coldness brought them together in death. All that remained were petrified silhouettes. Every moment of life, every fragment of hope, every longing for love vanished. Pompeii had now become nothing but a silhouette. All the houses, all the streets, temples, and villas, everything had been lost. The city, once a vibrant civilization, was now a mournful echo, a tomb for the petrified dead. The lava had swallowed everything, and in that swallowing, it immortalized the lost faces of Pompeii's people, their fearful expressions in their final moments. Now nothing remained of Pompeii. No traces, no sounds, no marks left behind. The city had been buried in a dark corner of the past as just a silhouette. As the people experienced the loss of their loved ones, with one last glance, one final step, a touch, they disappeared. There was no love left, no friendship, no money, no values, money. No, the people of Pompeii felt the wrath of the gods themselves. Yet until that time they were still chasing the lost pleasures of the world. Now Pompeii was just a memory. It had left nothing behind but its petrified remnants. The people had not realized the value of everything even in the final hours of this civilization. Today, every visitor stepping into Pompeii becomes a silent witness to this disaster. Only petrified bodies and a lightless city remain. Pompeii, in the final hours of its existence, became a tomb that carried the last traces of a lost people. Modern-day archaeologists, the moment they set foot in Pompeii, embark on a journey through time. Their eyes, searching for echoes of the past lost within the petrified remains, are met with a silence that answers them with one truth. History was once here. Each of Pompeii's petrified inhabitants is a silent witness to the painful extinction of a people. The fear, peace, loss, and joy within that moment still live on in the eyes of those frozen bodies, in those last whispering moments. Every corner of the city, every stone, and every statue carries the traces of those who once lived here. The petrified people of Pompeii, buried in history, do not make their final moments feel as though they never lived. On the contrary, each moment feels like the immortalization of a life. The fear in their eyes is the expression of inner pain from those who realized disaster was approaching, turning into a final wish. The moments when a mother tightly embraced her child, when a father gave a tearful last glance to his son, when archaeologists uncovered these people's suffering, their pain echoed once again to the world. The petrified people of Pompeii, frozen, in that moment of time, continue to carry a message reminding humanity of the pain, love, loss, and the value of life. Those petrified bodies remind us that they were once human beings, not machines, with feelings, passions, and dreams. Pompeii shows that a disaster is not just a warning, but also a call for a people to reevaluate their values. Every stone in the city is a lesson. It is easy to earn the wrath of the gods, but when the moment comes when everything ends, it may be too late to realize that everything can vanish. The petrified people of Pompeii, like statues bearing the painful traces of a lost civilization, take us on a journey back in time. Every moment in the city, every face, every smile, loss, and fear carries the lesson of how quickly time can freeze and how civilizations can disappear in an instant. These petrified figures seem to raise their heads, reminding us how precious everything was by looking at us. Pompeii not only tells the tragic end of a lost people, but also the value of life. Life, although it seems to pass quickly, often hides its most valuable moments in the quietest, most unseen places. Today, every visitor stepping foot in Pompeii not only searches for the traces of a civilization lost among the petrified remnants, but also feels the fear, peace, and loss hidden within those frozen moments. With every step, the pain in the eyes of the petrified bodies and the effects of the love felt during those fearful moments are palpable. Pompeii, just as it once expanded the life-filled city into a dream before the disaster, now presents itself as frozen moments in time. Pompeii's final moments are not just about a disaster, but also a story searching for the secret of love, loss, and life. The petrified people of Pompeii are reminders showing how valuable memories are against the infinite speed of life. Those petrified figures are a warning, showing that nothing is permanent and that time can come without hesitation and swallow everything. The petrified remnants of Pompeii continue to live throughout history, with a lesson reminding us that we must value every moment in order to survive. Time can wipe everything away, but every stone, every moment, every glance left behind becomes a legacy from those who lived through this disaster. Pompeii is still alive today, not only in the immortalized moments of the petrified bodies, but also in the deep meaning of life, hidden within the silence between the stones. And perhaps Pompeii's final moment is a reminder for all humanity. The end of everything will come one day, but the value of life is in knowing it, feeling the pain of loss, and leaving behind a story filled with love. Pompeii's final moment is not just about the disappearance of a civilization with every step, but also a story of the inner journey of all humanity.